So, so today I'm going to start by saying that this is 2024. Actually, the first month is almost gone, right? We're going to kiss it goodbye, and this week we start February. But this is an election year. Don't worry, I'm not going to be talking about politics here. You have to go somewhere else if you want to hear about politics. But there is this thing that when they talk to, let's say, presidential candidates, one of the questions that very often is being asked is, so when you elected a president, what is one of the first thing you're going to do? Or the first thing you're going to do? First thing you're going to sign, right? They always ask the question. Because if, depending on the answer of that question, it kind of sets the tone. You can understand who that person is going to be as the next president, or what is very important to that person. And I'm saying that obviously with a purpose, because we started last time reading Mark's Gospel. We are continuing that. It's just still beginning of that. And today we've encountered the first miracle by Jesus Christ. I don't know if that's your favorite miracle. That's not mine. I rather prefer the first miracle in John's Gospel, which is turning water into wine, right? It's a very good one. Some people would like to be water into gas because it's better these days. But I'll take water into wine. It still works for me. But anyway, there is nothing about it. By the way, there is nothing about that miracle in any other Gospels. Only John mentions that. It's good to know. But anyway, Mark starts with a completely different miracle that Jesus expels a demon. You just heard that, right? And it is significant because that's the first miracle, as if Jesus wanted to set the tone and said, well, you know, if you're looking into what is really important to me or what I want to do, that's what it is. But you have to also understand that people both back in the days of Jesus Christ, if anything bad was happening, they would immediately think of that as possession by not by the Holy Spirit, possession by a demon, right? So for example, I don't know, beautiful day like today, right? You wake up with a headache. If that happened to you 2,000 years ago, you would think you're possessed by a demon because you have a headache, right? So it was all about not only spiritual things, but also physical things. So that's what people understood. So probably the first miracle speaks of the power of Jesus, right? And you could even hear it, right? That the unclean spirit, oh, I know who you are, the Holy Son of God, I know what you're here, I know who you are. By the way, Jesus does not even talk to that, right? Just only basically orders quiet come out of him, right? He doesn't engage in anything. Oh, how wonderful that you know who I am, right? Doesn't say anything about it. There's no discussion with the evil one. None. But you may be thinking, okay, so how can I translate that into my life, especially in the light of what I've been preaching recently, which is becoming disciples or growing disciples. So I'm continuing the series called What's Worth Getting Up. So how can I embrace that first miracle? What message would that be for me in terms of me becoming a disciple of Jesus Christ? Well, what I would like to suggest to you is to take that first miracle as what can happen if you take Jesus seriously. And if you really connect yourself with Jesus, right? If he can expel demons, if he can do things that are powerful, what can happen to me if I am his follower? Or what can I anticipate if I really take the call of becoming a disciple of Jesus Christ seriously? For that, we have to move to the first reading that we just heard from Deuteronomy, which is kind of an interesting reading because although Moses speaks about that, or in it rather, but Moses, for those of you who don't know the context of that, Moses is basically on his deathbed. He is just about to die. Everybody knows what he's accomplished, right? He took the people of Israel out of Egyptian slavery. They walked through the desert for 40 years, right? So you see, and this is another interesting thing. I'm going to stop here for a moment, because when it comes to 40 years going through the desert, it's not only that they were wandering and didn't know where to go. Part of that was that they had to cleanse themselves. What I mean by that is, when you read the story when they were going through the desert, right? Every moment they were complaining about something, right? Oh, and the onions were so much better in Egypt, and the garlic was fantastic, right? And everything was phenomenal, right? So it took them 40 years to kind of put it to bed. What I'm trying to say is, sometimes what we are doing in our lives is we are going back in our memory to years past or the events past. Oh, that was much better. Now it is so bad, right? We need to be cleansed of that kind of thinking, because if we are not, we're going to be polluting our souls by constantly complaining, right? If you really want to put somebody spiritual to speak, or yourself to speak, to sleep rather, keep complaining. Nothing's going to happen. But let's move on. So Moses is dying after doing all of this that he has done, and now people realize that, and they are asking legitimate questions. And who's going to lead us now? What is going to happen now? Who's going to be our leader when he's going to die? Because we see he's dying. And Moses, still alive, says, and it's another interesting thing, right? Because they are just about to walk into the promised land. Moses, after doing all that, he never walked in there. He only saw it, right? He never walked in. But anyway, so Moses says to them, don't you worry. God is going to raise a prophet for you. Just trust in God. God is going to raise a prophet for you. What I'm trying to say is that part of becoming a growing disciple of Jesus Christ is, becoming a prophet. Now, prophet is not someone who predicts the future, as we quite often might be thinking. Some prophets were predicting the future, right? Like we were talking about last time about Jonah, right? 40 days and Nineveh will be destroyed. He knew that because God told him that would happen. But prophets are people who basically are responding to the call of God, right? No matter what the call of God might be. And I think that if you really want to be a disciple of God and a growing disciple of God, you cannot just simply brush off whatever God tells you, but you have to accept that. Now, what is going to be? I don't know. It's between you and God. I cannot answer the question. I only know partly what my role is, but I don't even know it fully. There's still probably something that God has in store for me, but I don't know what it is. I have to be patient, and I have to, of course, connect with Him and be ready for that and accept that. And your role might be sometimes even a role that you might not be thinking twice about. It's like, no, that's not really that important. Yes, it is. Even becoming, I don't know, a lector, Eucharistic minister, minister of hospitality, or money counter, or whatever the role might be in a community here, that's important. You might have quite a different role outside of this church that might be important. And God calls us because there is a reason for all of that to happen. I'm going to give you probably two examples. Maybe a third one is going to come up. I don't know. I never know what I'm going to say when it comes to the examples. But the first one, definitely, I know what I'm going to say. That's the example of St. Francis of Assisi, right? He lived in the 13th century in Assisi in Italy. He's very wealthy because his father is very wealthy. His father is trading fabrics. So he's traveling all over the place, and he's trading fabrics. They have tons of money. And St. Francis, obviously, is one of the most popular people in Assisi because he has money, he's young. If you wanted to go to the wildest parties, go to Francis. That's where the party is happening, right? Kanye is nothing comparing to him. right? Or the Kardashians. There's nothing comparing to Francis of Assisi, right? And then, so once upon a time, Francis is walking through the fields, outside of Assisi, and there's this old chapel, kind of, I would say 1/3, maybe 1/4 the size of this church, and it's crumbling. The roof is already gone. There's some walls. The altar is still there, but everything is disarray. Is the chapel of San Damiano, right? So he walks in into whatever is left over. And he looks at the cross, and there is a voice coming from the cross saying, Francis, rebuild my church. So he thinks, that church has to be rebuilt. So he starts putting, stones, and he starts rebuild. But that wasn't that church that what God was calling him to do. So even in the beginning, he didn't know what he was exactly to do. But soon after, he realizes that he is to establish a new religious order of poor people, right? And he goes all the way to Rome to be approved by the Pope, Henry III. And even the Pope doesn't really want to talk to him too much, right? Because what is this? He looks like nothing. He's wearing some kind of sackcloth. What is this? That means nothing, right? But the church was dealing with all sorts of different issues, even worse than nowadays. And the Pope is not really interested in talking to him. So Francis is trying to kind of explain what he wants to do, and Pope falls asleep. Imagine that, you're in front of the Pope. You're trying to make a case for you have your pitch, you practice that day and night, and the Pope is, yeah, and he falls asleep, right? So the Pope falls asleep, but in that sleep, he has a dream, and he sees a church falling down, and a man looking just like Francis, holding it together. So he wakes up and he says, approved, right? Because he saw that God was trying to tell him something, and the rest is history, right? That was in the 13th century. That was his task. And it became very popular, to the point that we have both our churches named after the saints who were Franciscans. And look who is in Rome right now. What's the name of the Pope, right? Right. He actually took it after St. Francis, right? So that was his role. That was his prophecy, right? There is another story, true story. I knew the priest. He actually died. It's kind of a funny story. So he was living not far from a convent of monks, right, and priests, monks and priests, a religious order, and they had a big garden, and they have all sorts of different trees and fruits and stuff, right? So him and a couple of friends of his, they decided to, jump over the fence and steal some fruit, right? So while they're there and stealing some fruit, one of the monks comes out and says, what are you doing here, right? So he came down from a tree and said, I was interested in joining your community. That was his way of saying, what he was doing there. And believe it or not, he actually became one of them. Right? But that was God's way of calling him. He didn't know how that would happen. He probably, if he knew that would happen, maybe he wouldn't come to steal the fruit that day. But that was God's way of saying, well, I have a role for you to play as well. Although you may not be able to answer it right away, right? Okay, that's the third story. I didn't really intend saying that. I'm not going to tell you too much. But kind of similar, it happens in my life, myself and three friends of mine actually. We decided to join the Franciscans in the beginning, and we thought of that, okay, we're going to play some pranks, we're going to have great stories to tell our grandchildren one day, how it was, how we were scaring people with dead people, because we wanted to kind of have fun, over the summer. But the summer passed, and we were like, I kind of like it, yeah, me too. And now I'm here, right? Because that's what happens. God has a funny way of calling people. And sometimes he numbs us in a way that we don't even know. But yet he's showing us a way. I have a role for you to play. And maybe some of us have more important roles to play or more visible, because all of them are important. And that's what it is to really take the call of becoming disciples seriously. So don't dismiss anything that comes your way, because that might be God's way of telling you, I need you to do this if you really want to be my disciple. And that is why, let's not even be, what's the word I'm looking for? Confused. Let's not even be desperate when we are going to be in a similar situation like the Israelites. What's going to happen now? Even now, when we think of our church, right, of our parish, like, what are we going to do? How are we going to bring it back together? Right? Let's just follow God. He has a plan for us. As long as we take whatever He invites us to seriously, we have nothing to worry about, right? Even if it's going to come through some, roller coasters, and definitely it will. But my brothers and sisters, that's why I'm inviting you to again take this call of becoming the growing disciples of Jesus Christ seriously, so that we could see that we have nothing to fear, because with God, no demons, no evil ones have any power over us. Once we stick to God, He's going to quiet everything that comes our way. My brothers and sisters, God calls us to become His apostles, His disciples. It's only up to us to answer yes or no. So let us pray so that our answer would be affirmative, and so that we could see God acting in our midst in a way that we anticipate, but also in a way that go far beyond our imagination. And may God bless us in this task.